how Invincible is invincible in Dungeons & Dragons, and even more specifically, how many hits does it take for Invincible to die in D&D? I'll find out exactly how many while building him true to character, and even more specifically, we're going to see how many hits from Omni-Man Invincible can take before he's no longer invincible. It's going to take a lot of calculating and a full build, so let's go ahead and dive in. Starting with the species. When we built Omni-Man, it was very easy. We went with an Aasimar, but Mark, aka Invincible, is actually half human and half Viltrumite, which we're saying is just an Aasimar. But the Viltrumite genes tend to be pretty dominant, so we're going to go with an Aasimar again. This gives us 3 important features that we need to keep in mind. 1, we get celestial resistance, so you have resistance to necrotic and radiant damage. That's going to really come into play later. Next, you get healing hands. So as a magic action, you can touch a creature and roll a number of d4s equal to your proficiency bonus. You can only do this once per long rest, so you have to use all the d4s. It's not something you can spread out. That creature regains a number of hit points equal to the total rolled. Then finally, the last feature is Celestial Revelation. It's just important to note, even though it's not factoring into his survivability as Invincible, it does factor into the overall playstyle of the character, because you can transform for a minute. And when you do so, you can deal extra damage equal to your proficiency bonus once per turn. Then on top of that, you have a type of transformation. One is some aura damage you can do. The other is like an aura of fear you can inflict. But we really care about Heavenly Wings, giving you a flying speed equal to your walking speed, because we needed a way to get flight right away. Then when it comes to a background, in the comics, there is a point where Mark, aka Invincible, and Adam Eve kind of wind up on a farm a lot, and that's just my excuse to take the farmer background because it gives you the tough feat. And the tough feat is going to give us an extra 2 hit points of health per level of our overall build, helping with the whole invincibleness of Invincible. Then when it comes to his starting class, we want to start with the highest health possible, and the highest starting health is going to be going with a Barbarian. And this actually factors into how Invincible is as a character, because one thing that makes him different than most other Viltrumites is that his emotions can kind of take over, most notably his anger. And Barbarians get Rage. When a Barbarian activates a Rage as a bonus action, they get resistance to bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing damage. This is also going to be very important. But on top of that, you get advantage on strength checks and strength saving throws. You get bonus rage damage whenever you make an attack using strength, but the big downside is you can't concentrate on spells and you can't cast spells. The other thing worth noting at level 1 of Barbarian is that you get unarmored defense. So while you aren't wearing any armor, your base armor class equals 10 plus your dexterity modifier plus your constitution modifier. You can still use a shield if you want to, but that doesn't really feel true to character, so we're just going to be sticking with base unarmored defense. Then instead of going any further in Barbarian, we're going to jump right into a multi-class and do a multi-class into Fighter. This is going to be important for 2 reasons. 1, Mark is actually kind of tactical with how he fights some of the time when he's not completely overcome by rage, so I think being a fighter plays into this pretty well. But also very importantly, we need to be punching most of the time, and being a fighter gives us access to a fighting style at level 1. So we can choose the unarmed fighting style. So when you hit with an unarmed strike and deal damage, you can deal bludgeoning damage equal to 1d6 plus your strength modifier instead of the normal damage. But if you aren't holding any weapons or a shield, that d6 instead becomes a d8. You also get an additional bonus for if you're grappling a creature, you can just default to 1d4 bludgeoning damage to them. Then also at first level fighter, you get Second Wind. So as a bonus action, you can regain a number of hit points equal to 1d10 plus your fighter level. You can use this feature twice, and you regain 1 expended use when you finish a short rest, and regain all uses when you finish a long rest. When you reach certain levels in Fighter, you get more uses of this, jumping to 3 uses at level 4 of Fighter, and then 4 uses at level 10 of Fighter, which is the maximum amount of second winds you can have. Then also at first level of Fighter, you get some weapon masteries, but we really don't care about that. You're just going to be punching. Second level of Fighter gives us Action Surge. So once per short or long rest, you can take an entire extra action on your turn. That means you can use it for more punching or whatever else you might be able to do with an action throughout this build. The only caveat is that it can't be a magic action. Second level of fighter also gives you tactical mind, so when you fail an ability check, you can expend one of your second wins to push yourself, and instead of regaining hit points, you get to roll a d10 and add the number to the ability check, possibly turning it into a success. But if that check still fails, you don't use up that second wind. Then at third level of fighter, you get to choose a fighter subclass. And this was a slightly tough choice, but I think Invincible is pretty iconic, and he's kind of a champion of the people, so I'm going to go with the champion subclass. This gives us the feature improved critical, so now you can critically strike on a 19 or 20 when you make an attack roll. And also, thanks to being a champion, you get remarkable athlete, so you have advantage on your initiative rolls and on athletics checks. And on top of that, right after you score a critical hit, you can move up to half your speed without provoking an opportunity attack. Fourth level of fighter gives us an ability score improvement. So this is our ability scores. I know Mark generally has some more mental abilities than this would indicate, but we really need to focus on the physical stuff. So this is what we're starting with, and then we're going to round out our strength and dexterity, putting 1 point into each. Fifth level of fighter gives us extra attacks, so now you can attack twice instead of just once whenever you take the attack action on your turn. Fifth level also gives us tactical shift, so when you activate your second wind as a bonus action, you can move up to half your speed without provoking an opportunity attack. Sixth level of fighter gives us another ability score improvement, because fighters get more ability score improvements than any other class in Dungeons & Dragons. So we're going to go ahead and boost up your strength by 2 more points. This is going to be very important until we start focusing more on the survivability. Even though his name is Invincible, I need to make sure he can punch really hard, at least early on. And we're going to be doing some big calculations on how the health works later. Then at 7th level of being a champion fighter, you get an additional fighting style. But since we're not using any weapons and we're not wearing any armor, there's only one other fighting style we can even use, and that's blind fighting, which gives us blind sight within a range of 10 feet. 8th level of fighter gives us another ability score improvement, so we can finally start hammering in on the constitution score, which will boost up our health a little bit. For every 2 points of constitution, we get 1 point of health per overall level. 9th level of fighter gives us tactical master, so when you attack with a weapon whose weapon mastery you can use, you can replace it with push, sap, or slow, but we're just punching, we're not actually using any weapons, so we don't care about this. 9th level gives us something kind of close to Invincible by giving us Indomitable, so if you fail a saving throw, you can re-roll it, with a bonus equal to your fighter level. You must use the new roll, and you can't use this feature again until you finish a long rest. But you get an additional use of this once you hit 13th level of fighter. You would get one more use at 17th level, but we're not going to get that high because we're going to be swapping classes at some point. 10th level of fighter would give us more weapon masteries, but again, we don't care about that. And then also at 10th level, thanks to being a champion, we get heroic warrior. So you can give yourself a heroic inspiration whenever you start your turn without it, meaning that at least one of your attacks is always going to have advantage if you want it to. 11th level of fighter gives us 2 extra attacks, so now you can attack 3 times per attack action. And then 12th level of fighter gives us another ability score improvement, so we can go ahead and throw 2 more points into Constitution. 13th level of fighter gives us studied attacks, so if you make an attack roll against a creature and you miss, you have advantage on your next attack roll against that creature before the end of your next turn. And then 14th level of fighter gives us another ability score improvement. So we're gonna take a feat, because we could take another couple points in dexterity, which would help our armor class, but frankly, we need to focus really hard on our health because of how all of the calculations are going to work out. So we're going to take a feat and we're going to grab durable. This would boost our constitution by 1 point, but it's already maxed out, so we don't get that. But it does still give us 2 features. The first is defy death, so you have advantage on death saving throws. Then you also get speedy recovery. So as a bonus action, you can expend one of your hit point dice, roll the die, and regain a number of hit points equal to the roll. And that's very handy because usually you can only spend hit point dice whenever you're doing a short rest to recover a little bit of health. But if you can do it in the middle of battle, that really helps your survivability. It makes you a little bit more actually invincible. 15th level of being a champion gives you superior critical. So now you can score a critical hit on a roll of 18, 19, or 20. And then instead of jumping into 16th level of fighter, we're going to go back over to our barbarian levels because we're going to be doing something a little bit tricky. So at 2nd level of barbarian, you get danger sense, giving you advantage on all dex saves when it comes to not taking damage. 2nd level of barbarian also gives you reckless attack. So you can give yourself advantage on all of your attacks for the turn, but it does give advantage to your enemies because you leave a bit of an opening when you're striking out so recklessly. Then at 3rd level of barbarian, you get to choose a barbarian subclass. And if this was the older version of D&D that came out back in 2014, I would have totally gone with a totem warrior barbarian, because then you get resistance to all sorts of damage except for psychic. But that subclass got updated to the Path of the Wild Heart, and that only expanded your resistances to everything except for force, necrotic, psychic, and radiant, meaning that it's basically just granting you elemental resistances, which we don't really care about. So let's focus on the idea that Mark's anger can really take over and go with a Path of the Berserker, giving us the feature Frenzy. So if you use reckless attack while your rage is active, you deal extra damage to the first target you hit on your turn with a strength-based attack. The amount of extra damage is a number of d6s equal to your rage damage bonus, which means that you get to roll an extra 2d6 because your rage damage bonus is a +2. Then we get to dive into 4th level of Barbarian. But there is one prerequisite for getting an epic boon, and that is just that you have to be level 19 overall, according to rules as written and confirmed on a number of different sources, even though I've seen a few comments here and there that try to argue one way or another. So we can grab an epic boon here and then jump back over to fighter grabbing another epic boon, because we are going to be able to get an ability score improvement at level 19 and 20. So here we're going to grab the boon of fortitude. This is going to boost our constitution by 1 more point beyond level 20, bringing it to 21. And it gives us the feature fortified health. So your hit point maximum increases by 40 points. And whenever you gain hit points, you can regain additional hit points equal to your constitution modifier. This is going to be absolutely huge. Once you've regained this additional hit points, you can't do so again until the start of your next turn. So that means you can do it only once per turn. And that's fine. We will keep that in mind when we need to. And then we can jump back over to fighter for 16th level of fighter, getting 1 more ability score improvement. And we're going to grab the epic boon of recovery. This is going to boost our constitution by 1 more point, bringing it all the way to 22, meaning that we have a +6 to our constitution. But it also gives us 2 additional features. The first is last stand. So when you would be reduced to 0 hit points, you can drop to 1 hit point instead and regain a number of hit points equal to half of your hit point maximum. Once you use this benefit, you can't do so again until your next long rest. Then you also get the feature Recover Vitality. So you have a pool of 10 D10s. And as a bonus action, you can expend dice from the pool, and you can regain a number of hit points equal to whatever you rolled. And you're going to want to spread these out, using only 1 d10 every time, because thanks to having the boon of fortitude, you get to add your constitution modifier, but you only get to do that on 1 roll. So if you're rolling a bunch of d10s, that means you're only adding your constitution modifier once. But if you're able to do every d10 individually, that means you get to add your constitution modifier 10 times. So now it's time to finally calculate Mark, aka Invincible's actual health pool that we've got to work with to see how many hits he can actually take from Omni-Man and still call himself invincible. So taking average amounts of health, because we're not going to be rolling for health or anything like that. Noting that a barbarian has a d12 for their hit die, which you have 4 levels of barbarian, and a fighter has a d10 for their hit die, and you have 16 levels of fighter, and on top of that, you have your boon of fortitude, giving you an extra 40 hit points of health. That brings you to a total health pool of 329 hit points. But don't forget, thanks to having that last stand feature, you get an additional 1 hit point plus 50% of your total. That brings you to 494 hit points, or an even 500 after you include your constitution that you get to add in. But we need to factor in all the healing you can do, because you can do all of that mid-battle. And we're going to be taking the average rolls for all of these. So you have 4 uses of your second wind, which is a 1d10. That averages to a 6 on the dice. Then you get to add your fighter level, which is 16, and then add your constitution modifier, which is another 6, coming to a total of 28, which you can do 4 times thanks to the amount of uses of second wind you have. That comes out to 112 extra hit points. Then you have that durable feat that gave you speedy recovery. And with all the hit dice you have, that means that you have 4d12 worth of Barbarian style hit dice and 16d10 fighter style hit dice. And don't forget, you can add your constitution modifier to every single one of those. So that's an average of 7 on the dice for the Barbarian hit dice and 6 on the dice for the fighter hit dice. And adding in all of those hit dice plus the extra constitution modifier you get to add in every single time, that's a total, just thanks to the durable feat, of an extra 244 hit points. Then you have your 10 uses of D10s thanks to your recover vitality from your epic boon of recovery, which is an average of 6 on the dice, and then you get to add your constitution modifier, bringing you to a total 12 hit points you gain every time you roll this. And since you got 10 uses of it, that's an extra 120 hit points. And don't forget, there's one final way to give you a little extra health, which is thanks to being an ASMR, and your healing hands giving you 1 use of 6d4, averaging a 3 on the dice every time, and adding in that constitution modifier, totaling out to another 24 hit points. This means that in total, with all of the self-healing that Mark or Invincible can do throughout the entire fight against Omni-Man, he will have a total hit point pool of 1,000 hit points, which is pretty darn close to Invincible in a fight in Dungeons & Dragons. So we need to figure out how many hits it's gonna take to deal that amount of damage and how long we can call Invincible invincible. And since I happen to have already built Omni-Man before on this channel, which I would totally recommend checking out by the way, but in case you haven't watched it, general spoiler, I made him an Oath of Conquest Paladin. So in order to figure out the amount of hits it's going to take from Omni-Man, we can assume Omni-Man will use all of his Paladin smites and attack twice per turn, factoring in the Paladin's radiant strikes, giving him an extra 1d8 of damage to every unarmed strike that he deals. And that unarmed strike is going to deal 1d8 as well, plus his strength modifier of 5. That's an average of 15 damage per punch. Then we need to factor in basic buffs, like Divine Favor, giving an extra 1d4 of damage, which is an extra 3 damage on average, coming into 18 damage per normal strike. Now, there's an additional 2 factors that will make this a little tricky. We're going to just assume Omni-Man uses an actual Divine Smite on his first hit every turn, and we'll also assume that he starts with his strongest punches first, or in Dungeons & Dragons terms, his highest level spell slot. So we will have to keep punching Invincible, working our way down these spell slots until we either run out of spell slots or Invincible runs out of health. But there's one final factor we need to calculate: the chance that Omni-Man will critically hit. Usually, the chance of rolling a natural 20 is 5%. But thanks to Omni-Man being an Oath of Conquest Paladin, that means he can activate his 20th level feature, Invincible Conqueror, which is very appropriately named, allowing him to critically strike on a 19 or 20, which means he has a 9.75% chance to crit, and it just so happens to also give him an additional strike. So if he does happen to critically strike, that means he has a 33.33% chance of critically striking on the first attack he does, which would be the one that he spends his spell slot on to smite, and a 66.66% chance of him critically striking on a non-smited punch. So here's how we calculate all this. We get to take the basic punch damage of a d8 rounded to a 5. We get to take the radiant strike of a d8 rounded to a 5. And then we get to add in our strength modifier of 5. And then we get to add in our awesome, our radiant damage. That's going to be an extra 6 points of damage because it's our proficiency bonus. Then we're also going to make sure we factor in Divine Favor, which is a spell that lasts for a minute and you can activate it as a bonus bonus action. And don't forget, we're also going to have our Invincible Conqueror active. So we get an extra attack and we get to critically strike on a 19 or a 20, meaning that we have to factor in our critical strike damage. Critical strike damage is going to be all the dice we have and multiply it by 9.75%. And since we can only Divine Smite on the first strike of combat, since we are assuming that you are just going to Divine Smite on every first strike, and we are going to be starting from the 5th level spell slots and working our way down, that means for the first attack you do on a turn, using your 5th level spell slot, you're going to be doing 58.19 points of damage, because you can only add in your Aasimar bonus damage from your Celestial Revelation once per turn, which is going to be on the first attack, and you can only Divine Smite on that first attack. And then the other 2 attacks you have for the rest of the round are going to be 19.26 points of damage when you factor in the chance of critical strikes. You only have 2 5th level spell slots, so that means you do that twice, bringing you to 193.42 points of damage. And remember, we're shooting for 1,000 damage because that's Mark's health pool, aka Invincible. We want to see how long he's going to be able to hold on to that name. Then after those 2 5th level spell slots, we got to work our way through the 4th level spell slots, and Paladins have 3 of those. So after downgrading our Divine Smite, that brings us to an average of 91.23 points of damage. And for anyone that's kind of calling out that I'm not factoring in the chance to hit, we asked how many hits Invincible could take, not how many rounds or chances of hitting he could take. So for the sake of simplifying the already overly complicated math, we're just assuming every attack hits. But we use those 3 4th level spell slots each round, doing 91.23 points of damage, and we do that 3 times, bringing us to a total of 467.11 points of damage. Then we get to start making our way through the 3rd level spell slots. This downgrades our damage again, bringing us to 85.75 points of damage. And after we do that for 3 rounds, that brings us to 724.36 points of damage. Then we have to downgrade to 2nd level spell slots, which downgrades us to 80.27 points of damage on average in a single round. So once we do that once, that brings us to 804.63 points of damage. Then we do it one more time, which brings us to 884.9 points of damage. But something very important happens here. We run out of 3 buffs, because we have 3 buffs that all last a minute. Our Invincible Conqueror, our Divine Favor, and our Celestial Revelation. And by the way, we're assuming you're just flying with your Celestial Revelation. I don't need to factor in any more damage from aura emanation damage. But after we take all of those out, which is your proficiency bonus, the D4, and the whole extra attack you're losing out on, that downgrades your damage for the last 2nd level spell slot to 46.75 points of damage, bringing your grand total to 931.65 points of damage. Then we get down to 1st level spell slots. Paladins only have 4 1st level spell slots. You would have used one of them on Divine Favor, but Paladins also get 1 free Divine Smite thanks to their Paladin Smite feature. So we have 4 more smites we can use. So for being able to use 1st level smites, that brings our round worth of damage to 45.25 points of damage, bringing the first time to 976.9 points of damage. So we're getting pretty darn close. Then after 1 more 1st level spell slot and another 45.25 points of damage, we've done 1,022.15 points of damage to Invincible. But here's the thing, Invincible's not down yet. You might be wondering why. We didn't factor in one major thing. Omni-Man is a paladin who is punching. He is doing Divine Smites most of the time because that's what he's used to doing, and that's what does more dice than anything else. The big problem is that does radiant and bludgeoning damage between his punches and his smiting and other abilities. The thing is, Invincible is also an Aasimar, and he's a raging barbarian. Aasimars are resistant to radiant damage, and barbarians, while they're raging, are resistant to bludgeoning damage, meaning that every bit of this damage is cut in half because he's resistant to all of it. So as Omni-Man pushes out 2 more punches, utilizing the last 2 divine smites he has available, with another 45.25 points of damage for each of them, and doing what he assumed was 1,112.65 points of damage to Invincible, he only dealt 556.325 points of damage. So he runs out of smites, he's running out of energy, and he just has to use normal punching now, meaning that he's actually only going to average 31 points of damage per turn, and that's before the resistance. So he has to keep pounding away, just pummeling Invincible over and over and over again, until Omni-Man's gotten to the point where he's on the 44th round of combat. And for point of reference, the average amount of rounds combat lasts in D&D is like 4. So it's lasted 11 times longer than the average fight. And how many total punches does that mean that Invincible took? Well, after all those rounds and starting with 3 attacks but dying down to 2 attacks after getting a bit tired, Invincible would finally drop to 0 hit points on the 98th attack from Omni-Man. So Invincible can withstand 98 punches from Omni-Man before he's finally not invincible anymore. Now, I'm not sure how many punches Omni-Man would actually be able to survive from Invincible throughout that entire battle, but if you want to actually find that out, feel free to let me know in our Discord. It's linked down below. I'll see if I can try and calculate it out, but this video is already long enough and filled with way too much math already. If you want to play as Invincible in D&D, I have the character sheet available up on my Patreon, linked down below. And if you made it all the way to the end of this video and all this math, let me know by hitting that like button. And I'll be here helping you roll at least 3 nat 20s in your next D&D session, especially if you want to play as Invincible in D&D.